Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Indiana Jones edition. Today, we're ranking, friends. What a way to end the year. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man donning his cap, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hi, Tom.
Welcome.
You've been wanting to put that. You must have been really chomping at the bit to get that
It's the perfect
impersonation in.
It's the perfect quotable, right? It's actually works in context as well.
Perfect.
I mean, I recognize that Mola Ram is perhaps one of the weaker links in the chain of Indiana Jones villainy, but all is forgiven for that one line, as far as I'm concerned. I think what really strikes me about it
You're
is
throwing haymakers already. I couldn't disagree more.
Oh, interesting. Well, I just think
I fucking love Mola Ram.
That's the thing. I love Mola Ram in spite of myself, because I recognize that he's a bit of a step down. But I just, all is forgiven for this. It's the broken English quality of this line, because it makes no sense in context.
Well,
right? They're not. He's not welcoming them to anywhere. They were in his Temple of Doom like 5 minutes ago. So why is he welcoming them to the other side of the bridge? So I just love the idea that they were like, Amrish, say something. And that was what he said, and they were like, "Okay, well, we'll think of something better." And
it's not even that, because he didn't speak English.
Right.
Like, Steven Spielberg would have to say lines phonetically to him, and then he would just repeat it. So the sort of the odd cadence and pauses are because he's waiting for Steven Spielberg. But for me, it leads to this really magical performance that I, to this day, still love.
Do you think that he was trying to say goodbye and it came out as welcome? The other side of it is, I think, the writers, because this also, it feels like a placeholder line that they forgot to replace at some point.
Uh-huh.
That they were just like, well, obviously it'll be something different than welcome, but let's just put it in there now so we can move on to the next bit of the scene.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. But I think in reference to a title, we said it was a placeholder and then it just stayed. I can't remember what it was, though.
But anyway. It's interesting because I've in preparation for this series, I've watched all the making of documentaries.
Uh-huh.
For everything up to the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it's kind of Spielberg basically admits as much, at least where Temple of Doom is concerned, that he was trying to recreate the Republic serials, that that they were multi-episode films that ended on a cliffhanger, and he talked about how there would be a week between them. And
oh, wow.
By the time, you would go and see them on Saturday mornings, and then you'd have a whole week without waiting to see how the cliffhanger was going to be resolved.
Yeah.
And then you come in the week later, and he said, we all forgot the details. So they could put anything in. They could cheat their way out of any cliffhanger because we didn't remember any of the details.
Well,
and he said
Annie Wilkes would remember.
Exactly. But great pull. But Spielberg was saying that's the challenge when you're doing this as a 2-hour continuous film, is that the audience is going to remember the details. But he found himself, throughout Temple of Doom, he had all these cliffhanger moments, and he had no way to cheat his way out of them. And a lot of that residue, I think, is still there, especially in the second half of Temple of Doom.
I agree, but I also, it's one of my biggest notes for that movie in particular is how much it feels like a serial.
Yeah.
back
also
from
than any of the other
more
Indiana
than
Jones
any of the
films.
others. Yeah, for sure.
They really leaned
Including
into
in music cues and stuff like that.
yeah,
And
and
I don't know.
racism.
Yeah, yeah. Sadly, in that too.
It's the most 30s 80s movie that was ever made
Yes,
in every
Got-
respect.
gotta be. Well, here we are, friend. We gotta rank these 4 movies.
That's right.
One just came out this last summer. Obviously, we both saw it in the theaters, but we've had to kind of pivot back and forth about whether or not we were going to end our year with this grand series, and then we got word it would come out on December 1st. Neither of us wanted to pay $20 for it.
No.
So,
and by the way, you're welcome.
yeah.
No, it's this was.
But
an
it feels like
interesting
a long time coming for a podcast called the Everything Sequel Podcast to get to Indiana Jones, but not our fault. They're still making movies, so
yeah, that was I think we were both waiting for Dial of Destiny to come out and for it to be confirmed that it would be the last Indiana Jones film. I don't know if we got that confirmation necessarily, but at least that the Harrison Ford phase is over.
It's gotta be.
Well, I mean, I didn't feel like he had one more in him at the end of Crystal Skull, but I was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So who
Clearly.
knows? There's still one more phase of Indy's life that he could catch up to. Right.
There's got to be some sort of tomb or crypt at the bottom of an old age home somewhere, right?
That'd be great if for the final Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones was the artifact that they were chasing for the entire movie. The tomb of Indiana Jones.
Trying to get his hat off of a stone piece and find the correct weight.
And it'd be like the final Poirot, which I won't spoil for you, but there's a similar twist there. or the Trail of the Pink Panther, which is a movie that we will probably one day cover.
Oh, we most certainly will.
That's the one after Peter Sellers had died, made entirely of outtakes.
I remember seeing it in theaters as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a slow week. It must have been a slow week for that particular movie theater. Today we're just putting on outtakes of Peter Sellers, and you're just gonna have to deal with it.
Oh, good times. Well, I mean, here we are. It's one of the seminal series. For someone of my age, it's like a series you grew up with and loving. I don't know anybody my age upon first seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark not wanting to be Indiana Jones for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with this series, and it can, even the more recent films continue to follow me around in ways that are almost mystical.
How's that?
Well, I mean, to put it all in context, Temple of Doom was the first VHS I remember owning.
Oh, okay.
The Last Crusade was one of my first memories of seeing a movie at the theater. I can still remember Julian Glover and Harrison Ford's big faces. That's like might be even my first movie theater memory. I can't really place anything before that.
Nice.
And then, Crystal Skull, I saw it at the movie theater like a normal person. But I was, shortly after its release, I was on a long haul flight to Australia, which was basically a day in length, and the in-flight entertainment system broke down about an hour into the flight, and the passengers are like near riot because what the fuck are we gonna do for the next 20 hours, right?
Yeah, right.
None of us are prepared for this, and so what they did was, and they couldn't get it back up for love nor money. They could not get this in-flight entertainment system to reload.
Tell me they started playing out the movie, like.
Well, more or less, yeah.
The staff started.
That would have, yes. They were like.
They're pushing the drink cart down and then swinging on vines with monkeys.
For the rest of the flight, we will be serving Dan Aykroyd's vodka. Yeah, no. What happened was they hooked up like a beta system, and so there was a broadcast network going through the plane. And so basically you could watch movies on a loop on 3 or 4 different channels, and one of those movies was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And
so you watched it for 20 straight hours?
Well, listen, I don't remember what the other movies were on the list, but I do remember that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was the only one I would even consider watching. So I cannot imagine the quality of the other movies that were offered. But yeah, it was just going around in a loop for the entire time, and I tried to start watching it, and I'd lose interest, and I'd take my headphones off, but it was still up there on the screen through the entire flight, and I'd dip in and out and watch large parts of it several times over without any sound. So it felt like at that point that movie's haunting me at that point, right? That's our relationship now.
Yeah,
is this following me around like a poltergeist, and then Dial of Destiny, I remember the day that Dial of Destiny came. I had like a ticket reserved, for like a few days after it was released. And then the day it came out, working at home, middle of the afternoon, my power goes out, and I look up I'll go on to the energy company and try to find out. They give estimates about when it's going to come back on. It's not going to come back on for like 4 or 5 more hours. And I was like, hang on, doesn't Dial of Destiny come out today? So I went into my AMC app, and I was like, okay, there's a 2:30 showing. Okay.
Do they have power?
Yeah, they did have power, yes, as far as I knew. And I was like, I wonder if there's any seats. And not only were there seats, but this seat that I always pick, if it's available, which, if anyone wants to know, I don't know why you would, D7. And I was like, wow, and it was just that seat. And so I was like, okay, so the universe is telling me I'm going to see Dial of Destiny today. And not only that, like I was, I had a couple of hours of overtime to work off, so I was like, oh great. I mean, literally everything is directing me towards the movie theater to go and see this. So
did that convince you of the quality of movie you were going to see?
Well, we'll find out, won't we? You'll have your answer in about half an hour. But I mean, that is a crazy amount of biographical crossover with the Indiana Jones series, I think.
Yeah, that's nuts. I don't have that much.
But yeah,
Yeah. A few years ago, I did show up to school. I was teaching drama and theater in San Marcos, and I came in full Indiana Jones gear.
Yeah.
Just to find out that because I'm the drama teacher and they don't tell the drama teacher anything because you're not like a permanent part of the staff, I'm hired by somebody else to go into this school. They don't dress up there. So I'm just rolling around like Indiana Jones, the only person dressed up. And frankly, I was fine with that.
The best part of that is like that you weren't dressed like Indiana Jones when he's a teacher.
Exactly.
You were dressed as he is when he's not, specifically
when he's not teaching.
And I love that inversion. That feels very us.
If nothing else, we must invert.
We must invert. And I love the fact that you missed the point on 2 levels. That's the other. You got the wrong Indiana Jones teaching costume, and there was no costume at all.
That's very much sounds like me.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was it like for you? My first question will be, what was it like for you? I could kind of split this series in half, or at least these sequels in half.
Yes.
So 2 of these movies I've seen so many times, it's not worth counting.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 only recently came out. I've only seen it the once so far.
Yeah.
And so the other half of the series I have not seen barely at all. So what was it like for you to watch these all together?
Well, full disclosure, we haven't rewatched Dial of Destiny yet.
True, yeah.
So we're not ranking blind, but we're ranking myopically because we've only seen it once. I'm interested to see it again, and interested to know whether that affects my ranking or not.
Yeah. I kind of came into this thinking this is how I'm going to rank, but I reserve the right
Yeah,
to change my
absolutely, yeah.
mind.
Yeah, because all I've got is an initial response
Yeah.
to seeing the movie once, and we can always revisit that. Well, I'm very interested in talking about this series with you because you're a far greater Spielberg fan than I am. But
Right.
previous conversations we've had about the Indiana Jones sequels, I get the impression that I like these movies a lot more than you do. So the roles are a little bit reversed here.
I don't know. I perfectly understand why you're saying that. I think I had let things slip in the past about at least 2 of these movies. But I
feel like I'm going to be defending Spielberg more than you are, which is a weird position for me to be in.
No, I don't think you will.
Okay, good.
That was one of my takeaways on this rewatch. I remembered why I love Steven Spielberg.
These movies are the main reason that I love Steven Spielberg, and I say that as someone who thinks that he's wildly overrated for some of the films that he's made, but not these. I think this is his level.
Okay.
This is where, to me, his strengths as a director are most visible. Is what he does in this series, and it's interesting because I assume you've seen the HBO documentary about Spielberg. Yeah. I think I got entirely.
But I feel like I need to rewatch it because I watched it some time back, and.
But I got, as someone who's a kind of Spielberg skeptic, I got entirely the wrong message from that movie. I think that documentary was trying to tell me that it was a good thing that Steven Spielberg got that review from Pauline Kael that called him superficial, and then spent the rest of his career trying to exercise that demon. I feel entirely the opposite. Right, I feel like when he embraces his superficiality, he's unstoppable.
He's great.
I feel like when he tries to attach himself to self-consciously worthy projects, because he's insecure about appearing superficial, I think that's when he goes wrong. So this series is a little bit like Guillermo del Toro all over again. Really, it's like this series is where he kind of finds his level, and often it's a joy to sort of see him work, and you realize that there's this kind of schlockmeister in him somewhere that comes out almost only in these movies.
Yeah, well,
and maybe Poltergeist, but this and Poltergeist really that's it.
But I mean, we've talked about Poltergeist, and we've talked about how much he may or may not have directed that movie, but his name's not on that movie.
In the same way, right? And it's very much on Temple of Doom.
Yeah,
but he's also making these movies. His creative partner is George Lucas.
Sure.
And that also cannot be
discounted
or underestimated.
Or yeah, right.
And if you watch these making of documentaries, there's a running theme, which is that.
Now, which ones are you watching? What is it on?
Oh well, I found them all on YouTube. They're all kind of contemporaneous ones.
Okay.
The Temple of Doom one was made for. I mean, they're all official Lucasfilm making of documentaries. Like the ones they did for the Star Wars prequels, they're refreshingly candid.
Mm-hmm.
They're real warts and all documentaries. They don't hold anything back, and you get the sense of this kind of copacetic antagonism between Lucas and Spielberg.
Yeah.
The again and again you get the same anecdote that basically Spielberg is fending off the George Lucas crazy idea mill as long as he can until he has to just relent and give up and cave. And the more sequels they make, the harder it gets for him to turn down George Lucas's crazy ideas. And the most telling one of this is at the beginning of the Crystal Skull documentary, where Steven Spielberg's talking head is him saying, George Lucas wanted to reintroduce Indy in the trunk of a car. And I said, sure. I was like, that's a man who's stopped fighting.
Yeah.
because if you compare it to the other ones, is like he all the way through Raiders he was going, let's see him as a champagne guy, and I was like, no, let's not do that. And then eventually when we got to Temple of Doom, I caved, and that's how it normally goes. And at the beginning of Crystal Skull, he's like, okay, George, yeah,
I'll try to make it pretty by doing an overhead kind of Hitchcock shot.
Exactly, yeah. It's like okay, I mean, I don't really want to be here, so
Well, I didn't know if I should bring this up now, or wait to get into the episodes, but since it kind of applies to all the movies, and we're talking about Spielberg specifically in his direction,
yeah.
one thing that I have had as a conscious thought, but not really ever verbalized it before. There's one thing that Steven Spielberg does, I think, in a magic trick sort of way, better than anybody else does, and that's sanitize violence.
Ah, that's so interesting.
Because and often he will also preview or post like section of violence. He will punctuate it with a joke. So he'll either preview it or punctuate it with a joke.
Yeah, as I say, I think it's because he feels uneasy about being seen as someone who puts violence on screen.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also someone who is incredibly good at it. It's almost the best.
Yeah.
The best part of his directorial portfolio. So there's a tension there, I think.
I guess it made me interested because while I was watching The Last Crusade specifically, because there's just so much death in it.
Oh yeah,
he's shooting 3 guys at a time.
That really stood out to me on this rewatch.
Yeah, we're blowing up planes. We're stealing people's cars. Not that that's violence, but there's
that guy they consigned that man to death. Because
yes, exactly.
In the middle of Spain, rural Spain, what's he going to do?
He's
now?
not going. He has no water. He's in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
He's gonna die. But I started thinking about that and juxtaposing it against the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, and realized that he can flex both those muscles.
Yes, that
to me was very interesting watching these movies.
And that's it's the same man who decided he wanted to take guns out of E.T. and then decided to put them back in again.
Yeah, right.
He clearly, there's an internal tension about being a filmmaker who uses screen violence.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of debating with himself what's appropriate, what's over the line. And when we talk about Temple of Doom, we'll also have that conversation, because there are moments of that really cross the line, not only for Spielberg but for
that's
PG movies in general.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because we all know that this movie, or not this, but specifically Temple of Doom and the movie Gremlins, brought forth why we have PG-13, and so it's thought of as this darker, more violent movie. And it is, compared to the other movies, but it's not like there's more death in that movie than there are in the other movies. And so I wanted to bring it up in the sense that dark and terrible things happen throughout this series. I think we often forget it because so often it's happening to Nazis. So we're okay with that. But
what's your beef with the Nazis?
What's your beef with the Nazis?
Oh, it's Mel Brooks. Oh, he's going after the Nazis again.
One of my all-time favorite jokes.
Yeah.
And I think one of Mel Brooks' all-time favorite jokes. But
just not to take us off on a tangent, but
too late.
That's one of the few moments where you see Martin Short as Jiminy Glick crack is when he asks Mel Brooks what he's scared of, and he replies olive oil. And he's just not ready for that response, even in character.
I forgot about that. Oh, that's good.
It's interesting what you're saying as well about the Nazis and Saving Private Ryan, because this is quite a pejorative thing to say, but it is something I do genuinely think that when Spielberg approaches worthy subjects, he kind of turns them into genre entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a danger of trivializing the subject matter.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting that, these are not movies that necessarily have big moral lessons or are making any big kind of historical revisionist point like they were attempting to do with Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List and Color Purple and films like that.
Sure.
And yet, in terms of the content, you've got concentration camps, you've got Nazis. The content is as kind of dark as those other movies, but the tone is very different. And I don't know if Spielberg necessarily ever knew how to make that transition where he wasn't turning everything he did into genre entertainment, for better or worse. Here, definitely for better. Maybe for worse in some other movies that require a bit more of a bit more of an art
defter touch.
Hand.
Yeah,
well, a bit more. It's like I always think of even the kind of contrast between Django Unchained and 12 Years a Slave, right? It's like you watch them back to back and you go, well, one of these is a Saturday morning kids cartoon, the other is like a real movie.
Yes.
And that I feel that when Spielberg attempts a worthy and epic that is very, very serious subject matter, sensitive. I don't know whether he ever does it justice. But he's good at doing the other ways, like taking that content and turning it into a genre film, even up to like Munich, where you're just like, well, this is a fucking great thriller, right? But what it's about is ridiculously dark.
Sure.
And same here with Temple of Doom, and you don't lose the sense of the gravity of what's going on.
No,
But it's always it feels like a fun adventure. There's no point in Temple of Doom where it doesn't feel like a fun adventure film.
Right. And I mean, they do things specifically in that movie to counterbalance. You introduce Short Round.
Well, this is my revelation watching it this time. This movie has, I don't know if I should save it, but I'll thumbnail it now and we'll talk about it in detail.
Sure.
Temple of Doom has diabetes of tone. It cannot control its levels of dark and light.
So I'm starting to get surprised because I thought, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I thought you had let something slip about this series that made me think one thing in terms of, say, ranking, and now I'm starting to think maybe something else. And
well, you know me, I'm like a BuzzFeed list. The answer might surprise you.
Yeah, so I'm excited to get to this. I mean, were there any surprises for you?
Well, to quote another Lucasfilm production, I've always known how I feel about these movies. And I'm interested to see what a second viewing of Dial of Destiny does, but even that kind of conformed to my expectations in terms of ranking. Where I struggle a little more is with Good and Bad, because I have a there's at least one movie in this list that I have a lot of attachment to and fondness for, but I find harder to justify artistically than the others. So, that's my Spielbergian tension. Is
all right
about one of these films, but that's really it. I think I'm clear otherwise. So not many surprises. There were surprises as I went, but none that affect my rankings, and only one that affects Good and Bad. What about you?
I'm the opposite. That's
good for this podcast. So
yeah, I, like you, thought I was going to have no surprises.
Yeah,
and I did.
It's great.
For at least two of these movies that could affect a good bad and affect my ranking.
Okay.
And I guess where I'm really struggling is with one section of, there's without trying to give too much away, I feel like one of these movies is probably a better movie, but the other one might be a better sequel.
Interesting.
And I don't know how to reconcile that right now.
It's interesting what you say, because...
But I also could be completely wrong about that, because the one that I think might be a better movie does... something I really... I'm being so cagey now. I feel like we should just start, but...
Mystery backs it up,
Yeah, I just feel like one movie does something, like flexes a muscle that I always knew was there, but I didn't realize how well it's done. I think I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it's a nice teaser.
I was so close to saying more, but I think I'll keep it.
Well, you're gonna see. You know, when I give my rankings, you're gonna see that I've been able to kind of break these films down into parts and sections in a way that I don't necessarily do with films, and that made ranking for me very easy because it just became a numbers game. You know, in terms of parts of the movies I liked, parts of the movies I didn't like.
I agree with you in that sense. In as far as compartmentalizing, I often feel that how successful an Indiana Jones movie is how well they handle the magical or mystical bullshit or nonsense that you're going to get at the end.
Yes.
So
yeah, I didn't,
how believable they make that, I think, matters for an Indiana Jones movie. And you kind of referenced it earlier in terms of George Lucas's ideas of, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they feel a bridge too far.
Yes.
So,
I mean, Spielberg's almost always right.
Yeah, right.
Making our documentaries, because every choice that he talks about is something that probably would have compromised the movie. The first one being about their kind of struggle during Raiders was that George Lucas wanted there to be scenes in which Indy was seen as the champagne guy, you know, the more traditional kind of James Bond, glamorous womanizer. And, you know, he was pushing for scenes in which Indy hooked up with the girl with the tattooed eyelids. And Marcus was supposed to find them, you know, drinking champagne at his house, and there's still a hangover. There's still a hangover of that, because that's why he has champagne at his house.
Yeah,
it's because like they filmed a scene where he was there drinking with her and then sent her on her way. But and Spielberg was like, no, this is wrong. Please don't do this. And then, but of course, you know, the problem was that, you know, he had to give George something.
Yeah.
And so he basically gave him the intro of Temple of Doom to make it to be a James Bond pastiche.
Yeah.
As a thank you for, you know, not
fucking up the first movie.
And it's like, I love it because it's just the right time to do that. And Spielberg's sort of like, okay, now we can do it. Right.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'll save it.
Yeah, we can go into the weeds about.
There's some really interesting shit about Temple of Doom to me. I think I'll save it for the episode, but there's a little turn, a little tricks that that movie does that only that movie can get away with.
Well, I'm always surprised to learn that it's a very unpopular sequel amongst the indie fan base.
Yeah, that's nonsense to me.
It bothers me. And I guess it goes against the grain of what we do here on the podcast as well, is that we embrace and celebrate sequels that try to do things differently and go against the grain of the original. And
right.
Whether you like it or not, that's what Temple of Doom is all about.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think fan-wise, there was this great narrative, at least in what at one time was an original trilogy, and that the first sequel was not very good, and that the second sequel was probably better than the first movie. And I never bought into that narrative, ever.
That's interesting. Well, that's certainly that narrative certainly no longer exists.
So,
yeah.
You think so? You don't think so?
I don't know. Well, maybe. I don't know. We'll.
I feel like the people who hate Temple of Doom really deride it, and the people who love Last Crusade, really love it.
But Last Crusade tries to make the case that Temple of Doom is a mistake in the way that it approaches the material, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think people are just kind of feeding off the energy of that.
Okay.
That it wants you to leave with a sense that Temple of Doom was a mistake. What were we all thinking?
Well, I think it feels like that because Spielberg felt like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
So that's the movie he made.
And he talks in the.
And I'm here to tell him he's wrong. You made a good film. Oh, I'm letting too much out of the bag.
he talks like he talks in the making of documentary. He said he wanted it to feel like a 2-hour nightmare, and he absolutely achieved that.
Yeah.
And to sort of disown it, to disown making the
what
film
you wanted to
make.
do.
Yeah, and being successful at it, I feel is again, it's that I think it's the kind of the self-hating horror filmmaker inside him talking.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's get to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been going first a lot lately, so
okay. I'm
gonna go ahead and ask you, what movie tops your list?
The movie that tops my list is a movie that has a superb first act, a really strong third act, and a bizarre and distasteful second act that nonetheless sort of works on its own terms. And that movie is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
All right. Okay.
The amount of that movie that works is far more than the other sequels in the series. I think that's the best way of breaking it down for me.
What I felt you had let slip earlier, not earlier in this talk, but earlier in, we were talking about something. You mentioned something about Spielberg. Spielberg thinks he did this, but he didn't. He did it in Temple of Doom, which is,
why
you said something to that.
Why you didn't see that as an attempt to bait you, I don't know. But
if for no other reason,
like any great joke, it's based on. There's a little bit of truth. There's a grain of truth in there, which is that it's the Spielberg I'm most comfortable with as a film goer.
Okay,
as expressed in Temple of Doom.
What was interesting to me was I thought you let something slip, and I thought we were going to be at odds, but you let that slip, and I have to tell you, for my front two, I came in thinking I was sure. Yeah. I was less sure after watching them, but at the top of my list was still Temple of Doom. This movie, I don't think gets nearly enough respect as it deserves, with all its flaws. And there's some not nice shit in Temple of Doom.
It's imperfect, yeah.
We'll talk about it, but as a sequel, this is the movie that I think works as a sequel.
Yes. Oh.
Better than any of the others.
It makes the argument for making sequels as well as, if not better than, any of the movies we've covered.
Ever,
absolutely. It's just
there is no movie I don't know of a sequel that has as deftly been referential to the movie that preceded it without hitting the audience over the head.
Yeah.
In ways that are charming, that are surprising, that are funny.
Yeah.
Better than Temple of Doom.
But I mean, again, let's go back to the Republic serial and the tradition that it comes from. Right? It's another. They treated it as another adventure of Indiana Jones. They didn't treat it as a certainly didn't treat it as a continuation sequel because it's a prequel.
Yeah,
but part of that was they didn't want to get bogged down with what happened at the end of Raiders, but the other part of it, I think, is just they were treating it as a Republic serial. And in the making of documentary, they talk about, the movie begins 2/3 of the way through Indy's previous adventure.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
So they're treating it as this kind of ongoing serial of adventures.
Yes.
And
I guess I'm gonna let out.
Obviously that is a traditional approach to a very early idea of sequels, but it's one that you hadn't seen in late 20th century sequels. And it's very effective.
Yeah, I think I'm going to let out of the bag now what I was going to say earlier, because the one thing I think that movie does too, you could make the argument that there's rot that starts with Temple of Doom.
Completely.
That gets into the rest of the series.
Yes.
Say, introducing characters that appear to be Indy's lifelong friends that we're meeting for the first time.
I have those notes as well. It's like because they did so well with Wuhan, they think they can do it with literally anybody.
Right. And you know what's the genius to me of Temple of Doom is that you can get away with it in that movie only because it's a prequel.
Yeah. Well, and because of how you handle it as well.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, they just learned the wrong lesson, which is that this is not this doesn't inherently work. You have to make it work.
You have to make it work, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there are just things about Temple of Doom that to this day, I just sort of relish when I watch it.
Absolutely,
I love that movie.
It's about a director embracing their superficiality, their love of the visceral, their love of surface and excess.
Yeah, right, surface, and
that's what the movie is about, and it's a celebration of all of that. It's it's really it's something else. Every time you watch it, you just can't quite believe they went through with what they went through with.
Yeah.
For a sequel to a hit movie.
To a hit film, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God for two bummed out guys that had ended relationships, I guess.
I know the making of documentary doesn't add up. They don't look bummed out at all. They look like they're having the time of their lives.
That's great.
And I think that's what Spielberg doesn't want you to know. I think that's why he kind of spun that divorce yarn. It doesn't add up. He's having too much fun.
That's funny.
Yeah, and the other thing in terms of the rot that I wanted to mention and just plant the seed and we'll talk about it in detail later. I think this is where magic realism is introduced, right?
Sure, right.
And fans pick the wrong battles with these movies because
it's not like
so much attention is focused on Nuke the Fridge as the moment that magic realism takes over the series, but it begins. It begins way back, at the least in Temple of Doom.
A man has his heart ripped out, and then his chest comes back together.
A minecart goes off one rail, goes into
and lands on another.
Lands
sure,
perfectly on the other. I mean, how you can go after Nuke the Fridge after this?
But what's interesting
I don't understand.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that you're bringing up that it starts in Temple of Doom, but let's be honest, Raiders of the Lost Ark ends with ghosts flying around.
But that's not what
handled in a way in which we don't judge it for it ever because it's done so well, I think.
I treat this is the thing. I treat the fantasy storyline in an indie film almost as a separate entity to the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. When I say magic realism, I'm talking about plausibility essentially.
Okay. Yeah.
And Raiders.
I mean, I think that still applies to the ghosts,
apart from Indy riding a submarine, across the ocean,
without ever being detected, and somehow I think,
apart from that, most of Raiders.
I think he's on top of it the whole time. Did it ever go under the water?
Temple of Doom doesn't stand up to realist scrutiny in the way that Raiders does.
No, yeah, you're right.
And from that point onwards, the series cares less and less about that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Want me to go next?
I could go. I mean, I can keep going if you want.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that it's going to be anything other than the same movie.
I think you're right. That's the sense I'm getting as well. But I want to say a couple of things. That
all right.
The next movie on my list, I'm drawn to one particular storyline in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than in Temple of Doom, the first act and the third act, I think are outstanding, and I can, and there's a lot I like about the middle of the movie. But when I look at the next movie on my list, I think about there's one storyline in this movie that transcends the others and is the reason why I will put it next on my list, and that is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
All right. I mean, we're in lockstep. I think we might even be in lockstep about what portion of the story for you is it?
Oh, everything to do with Indy and his father.
Me too.
I mean,
and I got to tell you, on this particular viewing, that it's kind of a coup to get Sean Connery in your movie, and he's sort of a perfect choice to play Indiana Jones's father.
And yet
But
playing against type. That's the other thing.
exactly.
Defies
I mean,
It's wonderful.
I couldn't believe how old he seemed in this movie,
I
and
have
yet
that
this
same
is
note.
this is the start of his second career as an action hero.
This is 6 years after Never Say Never Again. The last
Right.
time he played James Bond. And when he first appears in this movie, he looks like an old man on the bus.
Yeah, and it's like 7 years before The Rock, where he's
Where
gonna.
in some people's minds, he would play James Bond again.
He's playing James Bond again. So, but what stood out to me more than anything in little vignettes and small scenes, in big ways and small ways, these two actors together and how they portray their story are working at such a high level.
Yeah, they are.
It's
often pantsless as well, which was
yeah.
out. You know that story they were pantsless in the
yeah
in the blimp scene.
Right. And you know, it's funny because one thing I really noticed on this viewing was, I mean, Henry Jones Sr., he doesn't show up for 50 minutes in this movie.
Yeah.
So you only get him for half a movie, and yet it's the best thing in the movie.
Well, it's everything. It's everything to do to that storyline, and there are reasons why it works so well. Obviously, the main one you've identified, two of the great film stars.
Yeah.
Who somehow are even better together than they are separately.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the only time they've ever been on screen together, right? They've never done
I think
another.
so, yeah. Unless you count pictures.
Count what, like still?
You know,
images?
the sequel photos. Yeah, still images.
Oh. Have you been writing a pitch for a movie for a sequel called Pictures? Yeah, and you know the other fact is that famously playwright Tom Stoppard, who is perhaps best known for his Oscar-winning screenplay for Shakespeare in Love, took a pass at this script, and as I understand it, everything that he wrote for the Indy and his father scenes, they left in. So as I understand it, every word that comes out of Sean Connery's mouth was written by Tom Stoppard, and boy does it show.
Does it matter? Yeah.
So it's brilliantly written by a legitimate, craftsman, a dramatic craftsman. You've got Connery, you've got Ford. Steven Spielberg
Oh man.
Understands distant fathers, right? Biographically, we know
totally.
Distant fathers and neglected sons, and that's what this whole storyline is about. So the combination of him directing it,
You didn't need to make The Fabelmans. You got it in this.
Absolutely. It's so, but the problem, I would say, the reason why it's not top of the list is because everything else in the movie feels so hit and miss compared to this.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot of misses.
Right, and that's what I always thought. I always, like I said earlier, I felt like there was this narrative that this movie was so good it was better than the original, and people
that 50 minutes without Sean Connery is hard work.
Yeah, and on top of that, people thought this movie outpaced Temple of Doom so much, and I listen, we watch a lot of sequels, so maybe we're better equipped to answer these questions.
Maybe.
But to me, I don't understand that. I don't understand.
No, I don't understand
people disliking Temple of Doom as much as they seem to, and loving this movie so much, as good as it is.
Yeah, well, as good as that. It's the through line. It's the through line that's great. It's not the whole movie.
Yeah.
And some parts of it are a real. I find a real slog. To
Okay.
be perfectly honest, just weighed down with bad comedy.
This movie was. This is probably one of my favorite viewings of this movie. Like, this movie raised up for me on this viewing, and the one thing that I always knew was there, but I didn't realize how well it's done, and of course it's negated because they end up making more movies, but This movie is a sign-off. This movie is saying goodbye, and it's saying goodbye throughout the entire series,
Completely.
almost compulsively.
Yeah.
Well,
One of the first lines in the movie is, "You belong in a museum, so do you."
Yeah.
He belongs in a museum, so do you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about
I have that
Harrison
note.
Ford still making indie movies when he's 80. It's
Yeah.
like, really? We're going to start here?
What can I say? It's there's a lot to like in this movie, and
Yeah.
the big takeaway for me was not even just their relationship, but also specifically Sean Connery. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if he was nominated, but boy, should he have been. That's how good I think his performance is in this movie.
But individually and together, they're both incredible.
Yeah.
And you would only have to put a camera on me while I'm watching it to find out how I think about it, because literally I'm like Buster Keaton for like this kind of total blank canvas face for the first 50 minutes of the movie, and there's Sean Connery in the movie, and I'm just I'm like guffawing and slapping my knee, and I mean it's literally that quickly, it goes from comedy executed broad comedy executed poorly to broad comedy executed expertly
perfectly
in like 10 seconds
yeah
as soon as Connery comes on screen. And
when they start a fire and start saying, "Dad, what?"
Yeah, and don't get me started on "Son, They Got Us." I mean,
oh my God.
If there's a better joke about fatherhood in a movie, I've never seen it.
Not just that, I'll take it a little bit further. One of the things we always loved, which I guess to hear you tell it, George Lucas didn't want, but one of the reasons we always loved Indiana Jones because he was the sloppy hero.
Yeah.
And one of my huge takeaways for this was how sloppy both men were.
Yeah.
And never revealing it to each other if they could help it. And
Lucas,
boy, was that funny.
He wanted him to be, Calvinist conservative, and it was Connery who had to pull rank on him and sort of.
He pulled a Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, and just he was sort of say, let's make this guy more interesting. Let's have him sleeping with Indy's girlfriend and all that sort of stuff to kind of make it spicier.
Well, I don't think for many people, they might quaffle about. Is that a word?
No, it's not. But it is now, and I'm really glad you said it.
Quaffle is a word. It's just from Harry Potter. It's one of the balls.
Then I hate it.
You can't change your mind that quickly.
Yes, I can.
You can't. I caught you in my trap. But people might waffle. People might waffle between the two movies at the top of our list, but I think most people would have those two movies at the top of their lists. And then that leaves the bottom of the list.
Well, you've made your feelings clear. Calling it the bottom. when it goes from halfway down. You could also have said it's halfway up the list, but no, right at the bottom.
Come on. There's a top of the list. I don't care.
Well,
go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So the next film on my list is a movie that I think has a really...
I hope we disagree.
It's possible. It's definitely possible. It's a movie that I think has a really effective first half, and then an almost unsalvageable second half.
Okay.
And that's...
I know the movie you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the perfect description of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
So that is that's third on my list. What say you?
Okay.
I mean, you've heard what I thought about the prequels, so it's probably not a big surprise that I'd have more sympathy to a loathed early 2000 George Lucas film than I do, and I do. But I mean, I share a lot of the critiques of the movie, but I also think that the problems of the film are in the second half, and there's long periods of the movie that I can actually enjoy
Yeah.
unreservedly.
Well, I don't know if we've talked about it on air or not. I don't even know if we've talked about it off air, but I know that you probably know that upon seeing this film in theaters, I loathed it.
Yeah, I did know that.
I just hated everything about that movie.
To quote a Lucasfilm production again, I've always known.
Well, so here was one of my big surprises, because watching that film, you're right. I was shocked as to how easy the first half of that movie went down.
Yeah, this is where fandom has picked the wrong battles. I keep saying it, and particularly as it applies to Lucasfilm Lucasfilm sequels.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it starts incredibly well. I'm trying to I'm not saying that it's a perfect first half, but it's exactly what
it's
you
not.
said.
But
it goes down easy. It's very enjoyable.
It was
carries
much
you along.
Yeah, it was much better than I ever remembered, which was shocking to me. And so I really had to start wrestling with, because I came in with a preconceived notion.
Well, you told me, this might be where you spilled the beans. You told me that you would have to watch it twice, and that your first viewing would basically be like the scene where they're giving him like a radiation shower, basically.
Yeah.
It's like just so you could
hate it.
Yeah, that's just so you could sort of like sweat out the
anger.
Your hatred, and then
I'll tell you what else. I mean, this is just a minor side note, but I'll tell you what else helps that movie. Watching it on a small screen as opposed to a big screen.
Also, Disney Plus's color correction. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So the things like the fridge rolling over mountains, and
it's not helping either of our cases. You bringing up these examples.
I know, but it's a specific note for that looks way less egregious on a small screen than it did on the big screen.
Yeah. And I even look past the look of the movie in that first half, because I get what it is and what it's trying to be. Again, up to a point.
Say it again. You were cutting out there.
Okay, I said I look past the look of the movie. In the first half, because I understand what it is and what it's trying to be.
It's really hard to do that in the second half.
It just completely falls away.
Yeah.
And so everything that is visually wrong with the movie in the second half, which to be fair is just the style of the movie throughout, hits harder in the second half. It seems more egregious to me.
It does,
because it's part of such nonsensical storytelling that it rubs you the wrong way. And it's because you're mentioning things that happen in the first half of the movie that are indefensible. It's like Marcus Brody's head rolling into a communist lap. I mean, that shouldn't be in the movie, but it sort of feels like it's in the spirit of the movie.
Boy, did I forget that there was a statue of Marcus Brody at that college.
We'll get into that.
Wow.
There's been some serious retconning of this series of retconning of who and what Marcus Brody
is. Yes, that was one of my big marks when I first watched Crusade.
Marcus's, yeah.
All right, let me get to it. Again, I'm gonna reserve the right to change my mind.
I don't think we're gonna have one word of argument, Mike.
But despite
for the way you're approaching this ranking, I think it's gonna be plain sailing.
So I reserve the right to change my mind, but as of right now, today, despite my really gravitating towards the first half of Crystal Skull, I'm still going to say Dial of Destiny is next on my list.
You're absolutely wrong.
And there's one specific reason I have for that. I don't. Maybe I'll save it for the episode.
You went to the wrong movie.
No.
You accidentally saw. Mission
People ask
Impossible.
me what I think of Dial of Destiny when it first came out, and I kept saying it felt like a reasonable facsimile of an Indiana Jones movie.
No,
That's
tell us
not
what
a
you really
ringing
think.
endorsement. But what I'm trying to do is juxtapose what I think about a middling movie against a movie that is 50% okay and 50% so terrible I want to. If it was a human being, the movie, I would strangle it to death.
If that's what you thought of Dial of Destiny, then I agree that would be a toss up. That would be a no, that would be the coin toss, right?
Yeah.
Is half a good movie better than an overall fine movie.
Yeah.
However, I simply do not think Dial of Destiny is an overall fine movie.
Okay.
And I'm going to break it down for you right now. This is where it's going to get a little bit lawyerly, because I have a case to make against this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot that cannot be entered into evidence about this movie. And because of that, it goes automatically to the bottom of the list. Okay, Exhibit A. Exhibit A. 30 minutes of this film, I am watching a Harrison Ford digital avatar. That part of the movie, gone.
Okay. I mean,
Cannot be considered. Okay?
fine. Go ahead. I'm not even going to argue. Your
Exhibit
Honor, I
B.
retract my statement.
Exhibit B. Neither Lucas or Spielberg are involved in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is fan fiction. It is high-end fan fiction where they've got some of the original actors. So, I will evaluate this movie as I would evaluate Never Say Never Again. Exhibit C.
Just evaluate it for what it is, not who's not
That is
not
what
involved.
it is. It's high-end fan fiction. That's what I'm judging it against. Exhibit C. This is interesting because I broadly agree with the defenders of this movie that you cannot watch it as an Indiana Jones film as we once knew it. You have to watch it as a movie that came out in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we are living in the nadir of franchise movies right now, at this very moment.
Yeah.
And so everything 2023 about this movie makes it a worse movie.
Okay. All right.
So
I'm not going to argue
too much CGI, too
too
many
much
set
against
pieces.
Yeah, but
Too
you can't make
Listen,
that argument and not talk about
no.
Kingdom of Crystal Skull having the same problems.
Too much CGI, too many set pieces, baffling storytelling and characterization, length, all of that, everything that 2023 adds to this movie detracts from it. And then finally, Exhibit D. Despite the mental gymnastics that fans of Indiana Jones have done to say that the fantasy storyline in this movie is somehow equivalent to the fantasy storylines in the other three Indiana Jones sequels.
No, I'll agree with you there completely.
Or the other four Indiana Jones movies.
I know.
It is not the same. So basically the last half hour of the film that involves this fantasy storyline, that's also gone, right? So now we've got like maybe an hour left of the movie. And
Not enough for you.
It's a so-so hour, if that.
Now, I want to talk about your characterization portion of your argument, because there's one thing in that movie that I'm going to stick up for, and it was the one thing that surprised me, and therefore the one thing that I started to gravitate to and really like in the movie.
Yeah.
Because in the previous movie, you make a casting choice, and
I'm saying, yeah, I have no idea what you're going to say.
in the previous movie, in Crystal Skull, you make a casting choice for Shia LaBeouf, and he's going to be the son. Even the filmmakers decide in the last seconds of that movie, oh no, we're not throwing the mantle to you. Give me that hat back, sir, and put it on. So I think everybody felt like that was a a bad casting choice. I don't know. People seem to hate Shia LaBeouf. I would even slightly disagree with that for,
I would 100% disagree with
I think
that.
he does.
I think he's the reason why the first half of that movie is so
Yeah,
good.
I think he does fine in the movie. Having said that, they felt like, I assume, or maybe it's his own personal life shit, because he's been famously kind of hard to work with, or whatever. But they decide to not have him in the next film, and they kill him off screen.
Yeah, there's a bit more than deciding him not to have him in the film to kill off his character.
They kill off the character. Here's the thing that I'll say, though. Harrison Ford is such a good fucking actor that you feel the weight of that loss throughout the whole film. I do.
I feel the
Your Honor, I submit Mr. Stewart might be blind and deaf.
The slime trail of a corporate decision that has been taken to once again try and appease fandom by killing off a character who wasn't popular.
Mm-hmm.
And they make entirely the wrong narrative choice by killing him off and keeping Marion alive.
Well, why?
Spoiler alert. 2023 movie. When I came out of that movie, I was like, Marion should have died, and Mutt should have still been alive. Even if you don't have him in the film.
Why?
You don't have Marion in the film.
Tell me why.
Dead. Because it's a better story.
Why is it a better story?
It's what should have happened. Because I don't need him to. He doesn't have to have a broken marriage, and so much of the idea of him having lost his son doesn't have to be there. It can just be that.
I think maybe you're letting the fact that you're a father color how you feel about it.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, I mean, it might. What's letting me color it is that I don't, nor did I ever have the issues with Mutt that fandom had.
Mm-hmm.
The character or the actor. The writing of the character. I mean, he's caught up in that garbage truck of a second half of Crystal Skull. It's not his fault.
No, yeah, I'll agree with that.
Their relationship was developing fine up until that point.
I do think there are moments
and that has been misrepresented.
I do think there are moments where he's pressing as an actor. He feels like he's got the big part in the big film and he's with Harrison Ford. But those are minor quibbles,
totally
though.
Fits with the character. That's totally how the character would be reacting to this guy.
I kind of see beyond it too. And there are moments where he's welling up in a way where I think he's playing for an Oscar as opposed to just playing the moment. Yeah,
his emotional attachment to the character he's crying about is well established by that point. It was earned.
Felt more like Sandra Locke.
Well, we disagree about that too.
At any rate,
Well, I didn't see you. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see you defending.
I thought, yeah. Like I said, I guess we're gonna disagree. You're not gonna find me defending Dial of Destiny too much, but I
shouldn't have to settle, especially for a movie that never needed to be made.
Yeah, sure, but it was made, and they made the choices they made, and I think it's perfectly fine to tell the story of a father who's lost his son, and to have us as the audience feel the weight of it, and I do throughout his entire performance.
I think it's an albatross around the film's neck that it doesn't need.
Okay.
And that we don't need and a color we don't need on Indiana Jones.
To me, it was something interesting, especially after having watched the first two sequels, and how cavalier he was with his romantic choices. And so to see where his relationship with Marion went to, and how grounded the character became, and what had befallen him, that was interesting to me to watch Indiana Jones in that new light.
I find it all very disingenuous.
All right.
I don't know why we keep finding these legacy characters. It's the Han Solo problem. It's like, why do we keep finding them in these nadirs of their lives?
Mm-hmm.
when we come back to them. It doesn't help the drama at all. It only hurts it. And they did
Says
it
you.
again. Says me. Well, that's genuinely how I felt,
Yeah.
and I think it's that's why it's at the bottom of my list.
All right. So that leaves us with good, bad.
Mm.
Struggle at all? Top of the list, bottom of the list? What do you...
For one of these movies.
Just one?
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Mm.
Not much of a struggle, honestly.
No, mine is.
Okay. Temple of Doom.
Yeah, so
Good movie?
good movie, yeah. I think it had the potential to be a great movie, and I don't think it is.
I don't think it
I
is
think-
either. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
But it's frustrating because I can see a great movie in there,
Mm-hmm.
save for a few key decisions about tone at certain moments in the
Yeah,
movie.
right.
So it's a movie that also, as much as I like it, also frustrates me because I see far more potential in it than sometimes they see when they're making it. I think sometimes they go for the lowest common denominator when they could. They've actually got everything they need in the scene, but they feel like they have to add more or turn it into something else. But we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But definitely a good movie.
I
Not
agree.
as good as it could have been, but a good movie.
Fine.
Not as rich as they should be, of course.
Yes, yes. I think it's not just a good movie. I think it's probably close to a very good movie.
Yeah,
Like you,
would go-
I don't think it's great. Yeah.
but it could have been.
I know. Yeah.
And you know,
I mean, you know how I
if the
think about
movie-
it?
If the movie continued the way the first act begins,
Uh-huh.
if it could have somehow maintained that, which I recognize is not
yeah.
no easy feat.
Right.
But if they could have sustained that, it would have been one of the greatest sequels of all time, and probably one of the greatest Hollywood movies of all time.
All right.
That's how
guess
much I
it's-
love that first act.
Oh, man. Did I ever want...
It's special. It's really special.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's funny about that is it turned out Lucas, for all his middling, like that to me was a good choice.
Very good choice, yeah.
So it's
But
well,
if he'd have had his way, that wouldn't have been like the first time we'd seen that, and
Yeah,
therefore
right,
it wouldn't
right.
have had the same appeal. So
Yeah.
it's still Spielberg's timing that saves it.
that makes it right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say more, but obviously we're going to talk about these movies in depth, so I'll talk about it then.
Yeah.
Last Crusade.
Again, there's more than enough in that storyline
Yeah.
to make it a good movie, but again, it's frustrating that other sections of the movie just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of you can see what Spielberg is going for a lot of the time, but it falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that in this movie, and that's something I recognized on this rewatch keenly, that there's a lot of flat punchlines in this movie.
Okay. I and I think there's probably some of that for sure. I also think there's some fat on the movie,
Yes, definitely.
you know?
Yeah.
That movie
Well,
could
these movies kind of, I mean,
they get more and more bloated.
They get more and more bloated, although Crystal Skull, I think, is shorter than Last Crusade, or about the same length.
I think they're about the same.
I mean, it's no Dial of Destiny, but
Yeah.
few films made before 2023 would be.
Would be, yeah.
Would even dream of having that kind of running time. But there you go. It's the world we live in, sadly.
That's how movies are made today, my friend.
Yeah. That's the business we have not chosen, to paraphrase Hyman Roth.
I'm so scared that you're going to be right. I'm gonna rewatch Dial of
It's
Destiny
gonna go.
and
listen,
retract my
it's gonna
statement
go.
immediately.
It's gonna go up in my estimation. It might go a little bit down in your estimation. That's my prediction.
All right.
I think I'm gonna.
Because I was really surprised about the first half of Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Crystal Skull, the first time I ever saw it, like, the Paramount logo turned into a prairie dog hole, like, the little mound, gopher hole.
I understand. Yeah, I know.
And then a
like
CGI prairie dog fucking
it's
burrows out of it.
Caddyshack. What's not to like?
That lost me right there.
I'm all right.
Oh my god. And then they insist on keep showing us these little CGI creatures. Again though, not as egregious on the small screen as it is on the big screen.
I would happily watch that prairie dog do the opening of Dial of Destiny rather than Harrison Ford's digital head.
Digital face, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, god damn it. Yeah,
that's
right.
30 minutes of the movie, because it's 25 minutes and then they do it again.
Yeah.
And they're only trying to recreate what lies beneath Harrison Ford at that point. You don't need a de-ager for what lies beneath Harrison Ford.
All right.
Put that Just for Men in his hair and put him on screen.
God damn it. Yeah, have him grow a beard. That'll cover it up.
Well, yeah. It's interesting that the two Indiana Jones movies that were made post The Fugitive both reference The Fugitive. It's interesting. As if that's Harrison Ford's most famous film, which I don't think it is. Do I have a problem with it? Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Yeah. All right.
If that's his legacy, so be it.
Well, so far we're in lockstep. I, too, think The Last Crusade is good enough to be good. And it actually even kind of moved up in my personal esteem. I really gravitated it way more than I ever have before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm giving it short shrift by saying it's just that storyline that works, but that's what I mean is that it's
the best thing in it.
It works consistently.
Yeah.
And the execution is erratic elsewhere.
All right.
Noticeably compared to what happens in those scenes.
Agreed.
Still a good movie.
All right, and then Kingdom of Crystal Skull.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
To give it its full unwieldy title.
I was going to say, I was writing down the title on my notepad, and my first thought was, fuck, these titles are getting unwieldy. I had to go all the way to the end of the fucking page to write it down. Yeah.
But that's as bad as it gets, to be fair. That is where
they dial it back for Dial of Destiny.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, and so a game I like to play when I watch Crystal Skull, which I see that movie a lot. I mean, just on that one flight.
Of course you have. Of course you have.
But I think of alternative titles, and I've got quite I was like, what would be wrong? Like, what would be the problem calling this Indiana Jones and the Lost City of Gold?
Yeah, right.
Indiana Jones and the City of Gold. Indiana Jones and the Road to El Dorado.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Source of Men from Mars in a pinch will do.
Indiana Jones and the Adventures of Mutt. Yeah. No, that's bad.
Again, the only person who benefits from that title is and not at the time, but now, Dan Aykroyd with his vodka sales. Now he's got a brand to... Of course, Dan Aykroyd is in one of these movies as well.
Of course, yeah.
Pretending to be Michael Palin.
All right. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I never thought could do this, but it actually made me think about, hey, is this movie good?
Yeah. That's about the best you can hope for.
Yeah. And
I'm glad you had that moment, though.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Welcome to my world.
I was impressed it was able to do that. And I got to tell you, an hour in, I was starting to get worried. Because
that the whole movie was going to be as good as that.
I came in grinding my axe, and then I was like, do I have to put my fucking axe away? It's nice and sharp. But then the second of the half of the movie revealed itself, and it was...
You thought about those monkeys, and you're like, oh, well, that's yet to come, so...
Monkeys
it's not gonna get better.
Monkeys followed by chases on cliffs, and Jeep crashes, and ants, and driving off cliffs into trees, and fucking waterfall falls.
And the greatest crime of all? Wasting John Hurt.
It's my biggest note from that movie, where in the last 5 minutes he actually speaks, and I thought, you really wasted the talent of an incredible actor, didn't you?
Yeah, you had I, Claudius, and this is what you made him do. For
fuck's sake.
Although, clearly, he managed to fit in his scenes for Harry Potter while he was...
Must have, yeah.
And he just so Steven would be like, look, I'm doing Harry Potter. Can I just come in occasionally and say some gibberish and then leave? Yeah, that's fine.
Well, at the end of the day, it was still a bad movie.
Yeah, that's where I ended up with it, I think. The second half is so egregious.
Yeah, it really
and everything that everyone says about the movie is true, but it only applies to the second half. And, it's like diminishing returns, but in real time. So yeah, I think it is. It's under 50% of a good movie, so it's not a good movie.
Yeah. All right.
But I think you should definitely reevaluate.
I will.
Of the movie that have been traditionally derided that are actually better than you remember them, but the whole movie doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah. I was, it was funny because I was a little disappointed all over again, because it started to make me feel hopeful.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this movie's way better than I remember in this first half, and then the second half I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, now I remember why you're not a good movie. You're just not.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I'll save it.
God. What giant bugs have you seen in these credits?
I was just gonna talk about, like, were these people with the bolos? Were they ghosts? Were they just living in those rocks waiting?
Also, it's very late in the movie when you learn that they're called the Ooga. Yeah. I would argue too late for it to be relevant.
Ooga.
Yeah.
All right. That's I think I know.
The thing is, though, I like them in the first half. I don't like them in the second half. It literally applies to everything in this movie.
All right.
What if it turns out that, like, Steven Spielberg had a stroke on set that nobody ever knew about, and that Lucas directed the second half only? That would make total
that would explain
sense,
it all, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. It seems like in the second half of this movie, George Lucas wouldn't budge.
Yeah.
Do you in your behind the scenes stuff, because I remember seeing something at the time with the two of them talking to a reporter.
You've told me about this. I've yet to find it.
Fuck, it's so funny. Yeah. Where George Lucas just says, it doesn't matter, everybody's gonna hate it anyway.
I'd love to find that.
Steven Spielberg says, wait a second, I don't feel that way at all, just so you know.
That's their relationship in a nutshell.
That's so funny.
Although, it looks like Spielberg was dragged back kicking and screaming by both Lucas and Ford for this one, but quite enjoyed it in the moment. That's what he reports, and he's a refreshingly candid behind the scene presence, especially compared to Lucas. We saw in those prequel making of documentaries that Lucas gets very defensive about his choices, whereas Spielberg will freely admit that
if he fucked something up.
Or just that he's flawed and his movies could be seen a certain way. There's a great clip of him directing Kate Capshaw on Temple of Doom, and he says to her, "And then we do what happens in every Lucas Spielberg production: pointless screaming." And I like that self-awareness, and you see it a lot.
That's nice. Yeah.
He's willing to sort of poke fun at himself in a way that Lucas is very much not.
I do think, well, we'll talk about it later, but the pointless screaming fits the serial idea, though.
Yeah, but I like that he attributes the kind of movies that he and George Lucas make, and that's a self-awareness that Lucas doesn't have about his own work.
Sure. All right, I'm gonna take a wild stab.
Don't put any money on it.
And I'm going to say that you think Dial of Destiny is a bad movie.
Mike, is one of the worst movie experiences of recent memory for me.
Man.
Yeah.
All right.
I found very little to enjoy about it. I definitely don't think, even with my objective brain, that it constitutes a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have,
It's funny that I started to waffle in my own head again because I think I did this recently. I can't remember on what series where I had ranked something higher. Oh, I think it was the Star Wars. I think it was the prequels. I was going to rank higher, but never considered it a good movie. And the movie I was putting below it, I had considered being a good movie. And I considered... At least when I was watching the first half of Crystal Skull, I was like, is this a fucking good movie?
And what? Again, this goes back to, I think, one of the key reasons is that, this should be a Lucas and Spielberg should be involved somewhere for it to be an Indiana Jones movie. And once you take that out of the equation, there's a kind of surfeit of imagination that comes with that.
Mm.
And it's like, you're never going to get better than the most basic TV movie. And not even the good ones, not even the good ones like the David Chase written Rockford TV movie reunions, which that's what this is. Like, dressing it up as a theatrical Indiana Jones movie. Well, financially it was a big mistake, but I think artistically too, this should have been a made-for-TV reunion special.
Man, you don't like it.
I would have liked that. If this was a kind of old Indiana Jones kind of counterpoint to young Indiana Jones, that would have been great. I would have liked that. The moments of the movie I like are the moments of the movie where I feel like they're thinking about young Indiana Jones and that projection of old Indy.
Mm-hmm.
I actually that was the bit I was worried most about that they were going to lean into, and when they leaned into it, I started to enjoy the movie.
All right. I just remember thinking, it was funny because I remember when I first watched it, I was like, well, who the fuck is Antonio Banderas? It's like we've known this guy the whole time. We've never met him, and then he dies 15 minutes later.
He's Mac Mark II.
Yeah, and as I start watching as I start watching the other movies, I thought, oh boy, they did that a lot, didn't they?
They didn't solve the Mac problem. They just split him up into different people.
Yeah.
That's not solving the problem.
Well,
that's just making more Macs.
Too good, too bad.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We're in agreement.
Yeah.
But for one of the movies, we disagree quite how bad it is.
Yeah. I might change my mind. We don't know.
About how bad it is?
Yeah.
You seem certain that it's going to go down in your estimation.
I'm worried.
Because it can only go up in my estimation.
I mean,
my estimation is in that swirling pit of lava from Temple of Doom right now.
Sure, yeah.
For Dial of Destiny.
But so
you might like it more.
You don't seem to be able to compartmentalize that particular movie like you were talking about you do with the other movies.
I did. I compartmentalize and all those compartments.
Yeah, but you're also chucking them out.
Well, that's it. But that's the problem. I've identified those compartments and then I've thrown them all away.
Can't you compartmentalize without
and
throwing
I'm left
them
with
away?
about half an hour of a fugitive ripoff.
Listen, you and I completely agree about the de-aging nonsense. Now the
Which
question,
I can't believe they got away with. Like, I
I
can't
know.
believe people didn't walk out of the movie theater. Or maybe they did.
but
The problem was people didn't go into the movie theater. Not
I
that
guess
they walked out.
maybe this is just I mean, we all know that I maybe one of the most generous film goers there are.
You are, yeah. And that's
So
a good
is it
thing.
just that nature? I'm surprised you just chuck it out. Like, I disagree with the decision. I think it's stupid. The de-aging thing, get rid of it. But there it
But
is
it's
on screen.
everything.
There it is on screen. So what do I think about this
But the
this
movie's
scene
like yeah.
despite that?
No,
And
because
then
you cannot take the Polar Express out of a fucking live action movie. And there's nothing left.
I compartmentalized the face.
Oh, come on.
I did. Now, what I was
mean-
left with was still not good. So, but I don't
it's
chuck
not-
the whole scene out.
You're just watching a pixel
I know.
that can't look at you in the eye. Quite literally can't look at you in the eye.
Here's what I told other people. I said, I think it looked better than it had ever been done before and still looks terrible.
It still looks terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we've not actually come that far since Polar Express
Right.
in terms of representation. We might kid ourselves that we've got slicker with it, which we have, but we've not solved any of the problems. Which is, it doesn't look like a person.
How much did it bother you for Irishman?
Oh, I hate The Irishman, but I think it's a bad movie anyway.
Okay. I'm trying to remember the faces. I can't remember any of the de-aged faces right now for that movie. It's not a ringing endorsement
okay, so
for the
De
movie.
Niro,
But
imagine a cat. That's it. You don't need to. You only need
Done?
to imagine a cat. It was just a fucking cat in overalls.
does it have nipples?
Butthole. The butthole cut of The Irishman. No, I mean, you know, we've talked about this before, like what, and there's even examples of it in the series of what you gain when you cast a young actor
Yeah. Yeah.
in the role rather than de-aging them. I mean, you know,
totally.
you wouldn't want to have Last Crusade without River Phoenix, and that's essentially what they're telling you with Dial of Destiny that the industry needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bullshit. It's
Yeah, it's
absolute
nonsense.
bullshit.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it. We agree with the top. We disagree on the bottom ranking, but we're both saying too good and too bad.
Yeah.
We're close.
And we've still got
And
to
we
see
might-
Dial of Destiny.
We might
again.
get closer.
Or we might get further apart.
We might. Yeah.
Or we might get closer, but by us both liking the movie more than we did when we first saw it.
Right. All right.
Those are the three possibilities.
Anything left?
No.
Let's call it a day. This is a long one.
Yeah. This has been, predictably so.
It's Indiana Jones, but
Yeah. Doesn't get any bigger.
well, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear us next time, we'll be talking about our favorite,
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I'm very excited.
Very excited. Yes, I can't wait to break it down scene by scene.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
you're-
there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there really is. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to tell us what you think. What is your ranking? Send us a message, would you? I want to know rankings. Nobody ever tells us their rankings, Tom. Are these movies good or are they bad? Send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and nothing else. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
What sort of a man hides in a hedge while his friend is facing death? This is going to be a struggle because right now my two highlights from Dial of Destiny, that line and Toby Jones's hair.
Toby Jones, another lifelong friend that we never knew of.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You know what's interesting is Toby Jones stars in a British TV series called Detectorists, which is a comedy drama about like hobbyists who use metal detectors to find treasure.
Uh-huh.
And they did a special episode after after Toby Jones had rapped on Indiana Jones, and as the episode goes on, you realize that it's about the Holy Grail. That they found the Holy Grail, but it creeps up on you so brilliantly because they think they found this innocuous cup, and then one of their friends starts drinking his tea out of it, and then he comes into the meeting room the next day, and he looks
He's
like 10
a
years
baby.
younger. Yeah.